Hello everybody, my name is Noz Urbina, your host at the Truth Collapse podcast. My guest today is Lasse Rindom, the AI lead at Basico and the host of the Only Constant podcast, where he has some very interesting discussions with some very important leaders in the world of AI. He uses his personality and charm to get some great guests, and that's how I met him originally. Lasse is a former poet and philosopher, and he is really into the practical realities and human side of AI. What we're going to address in this episode is probably some of our most impassioned discussion, and definitely going into the bigger picture. I can't say that we solved social problems in this episode, but I really hope that you find it to be an honest and open discussion and looking at some issues that maybe are not getting enough attention when it relates to how algorithms are affecting our society. We're going to discuss how artificial intelligence has been influencing our information diet for over 2 decades, common theme on this podcast, why the collapse of time and space on the internet creates fundamentally different social problems. We're going to look at historical parallels between the current polarization and how we've faced reorganizations in other times of technical disruption, and how these attention-based algorithms inevitably reward extreme content, why tolerance requires accepting imperfect communication, which I hope you will do when you read this, when you listen to this podcast, rather than perfect categorization and prepared messaging. We're also going to look a little bit about how different cultures see this. So, I've lived in Canada and work in the U.S., and I'm from South America. Europe. Lasse is a tried and true European, which is where I now live. He lives in the north. I live in the south. And we're going to look at different perspectives on issues of culture and how culture is affected by technology. And we're going to try to look at how we can navigate these complex topics without falling into oversimplification or mythological thinking or banding into camps. We are a young and growing podcast, and we are trying to provide you as much value as we can, and we hope you share some of that around to some of your peers and colleagues who might appreciate it. Thank you very much, and without any further ado, enjoy the episode. Hello everybody, my name is Noz Urbina. I am the host of the Truth Collapse podcast and the founder of Urbina Consulting. I am here today with Lasse Rindom. I hope you joined us on the Omnichannel X podcast if that kind of thing is of interest to you, but if not, then I will introduce Lasse now. He is the AI lead at Basico, and the host of the Only Constant podcast. He explores the intersection of artificial intelligence, business, and society, so very appropriate for Truth Collapse listeners, through conversations with global thought leaders and innovators. His background personally is as a technology executive and consultant, and he is an expert in AI, automation, and digital transformation. So we're kind of like brothers from another mother. We see things in similar ways, but from different perspectives.
Great.
Like myself, through his podcast and professional work, he has dedicated himself to trying to demystify the complex technological trends and foster an open dialogue about the opportunities and challenges presented by emerging technologies. He's also a historian. He used to do poetry, and his LinkedIn posts are really actually very funny. He does crack me up, and he does find always the best AI memes for our enjoyment. So, hello, Lasse. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Noz, and thank you for that introduction. It's a very nice one, and I'm really happy if I make you laugh a little bit. I think you're a busy man, so I think you might need it as well, right? But I'm really happy to be here, and I think you're completely spot on saying that we're brothers from another mother, or brothers from, I don't know, somewhere else in the world as well, right? I remember our conversation on my podcast. It was really engaging and went to some places nice because we understood each other, right? I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're in a situation now where we're in such an intense hype bubble. We've lived through many hype bubbles, but this is a really intense one, and so people are at a lot of extremes, and it's nice to find somebody who's at neither, not raging against or blindly chasing the dreams of AI.
Yeah, I think
I can see you're in a new place since the last time we talked.
Yes, that's true. We had to reschedule a couple of times, right, just to get the second one going. And I'm actually in my basement at home right now. So, and I have, the house is actually pretty nice, but I have this lousy basement thing. So, where I can have my office. I think I don't know if it's a punishment or what it is, but it works. Usually I don't care, but it is not necessarily the best recording studio from sites.
Yeah, well, I think it looks like one of those modern industrial style offices. I think it looks very intentional.
But you're not at home either, Noz, are you?
No, as you said, I am a busy man, so I am recording from a conference. I'm at the Web Summer Camp, which by the time this goes out will have passed, but I'm recording here in the Croatian Riviera, which is I won't show you, but you can just see in the reflection there in the window.
Nice.
There are worse places to work from.
Yeah, but you could join me in my basement if you want to. You're always welcome.
Okay, next one we'll do in your basement.
Great.
Okay, so yes, for those of you who are just listening to the audio, Lasse and I are in quite different environments, but we are in the same sociocultural environment. So, Lasse, you have described yourself as a cultured and flamboyant digital transformation leader. How did a history graduate who started in shipping become an AI evangelist in Denmark? What's kind of shaped your worldview on technology and society?
I think, first of all, the word flamboyant, I loved when I realized there was a word called flamboyant, because it's also like that just has to fit me to some extent, right? I move in different in multiple spheres at the same time all the time, and that just means, sometimes the word flamboyant just meant not ADHD or something like that. So I really like that. But I don't think that is either the case. But for me, I studied history, as you said, and now I'm working in AI, and I think my worldview on technology is that it has to serve a purpose that goes beyond just the here and now and just what we see today. It also has to serve a purpose that will go in the future and in the past. But, for me, as a historian who's now in technology is about more than just the right now and right here and what we can see right now that we can do right now. It's all about where will this take us in the future? Where has this taken us from? What worked in the past, and how should we take what worked in the past, what was valuable in the past, and turn it into something that remains valuable in the future, and only replace the bad parts. So for me, it's more of I always say there's a worldview more than a synchron, just here and now worldview. It also means that every time I look at a process,
diachrone, so just for those
diachrone
who are
cross
not familiar
time,
with the term,
right? Where the synchron means you cut it right now as we look here and now. Oh, AI is so great right now. Yeah, okay, but when we optimize all the processes we're doing right now, will the AI might replace everything now, but then we'll make something else up. And what's that going to be? That's the interesting thing. So instead of just looking at right here, right now, and how an AI that we can see 10 years from now will easily replace everything we do now, I'm always saying that, but how will it look in 10 years? How will all of these different ecosystems evolve? Or, I don't see that, but I'm trying to envision that whenever I think. And it's something that also influences my way of approaching any type of process. Always saying, it's not the thing you're doing right here that's interesting. It's what comes, downstream, and what goes downstream and what comes upstream from it. And I think, okay, now let me just wrap that history thing up. I was never the history guy who went into history to study tanks in World War II. I know a lot of guys did that. I meet them all the time. They're like, oh, you study history? Oh, what do you think about the Panzer II, blah, blah, something. I'm like, I have no opinion whatsoever. I don't even know any of the battles. I don't care, right? What I'm interested in is seeing how did society evolve to end up in a World War II, and what did World War II mean for societies and mentalities after the World War II, right? So for me, that's my way of looking at things. And you said, demystify as well in your introduction. I tried to demystify things. And I think the funny thing is that by demystifying, sometimes you also have to take the complex approach and the complex perspective. So demystifying does not mean simplifying. I don't think anything has to be simple. If things are complex, they're complex. Then you just have to explain them over and over and over until people somehow understand some of it. But it's not a simplification of it. There's nothing I hate more than people asking me to give a simple, practical overview of something that's utterly complex, right? Because in the end, that would mean that I would have to, take down extremely complex things like that I really care about. Quantum mechanics works, even though it's not easy to explain, right? It just works. It does a lot of good things for us. So because it's complex does not mean it's not true.
So I'm only going to interrupt you because you just kind of nonstop or leaning into this brother from another mother joke that I made at the beginning. For those of you who are just listening, you won't see that we're also wearing the same shirt. But I couldn't agree more, which I hope we'll find some good disagreements later because otherwise it'll be a very boring podcast. But when you simplify something which is truly complex, you are falsifying. You are creating a pretty narrative to make complex reality more palatable. And I think it's one of the most dangerous things you can do is to just always give in to, okay, well, we have to simplify this. I think making something relatable is not the same as making something simple because we all have lived complex things. And I think you can elaborate and explain and break down and go step by step through the complexity, which will make it easier to digest, but that is not taking away or falsifying the complexity. And I think that in a time like now, when it's very easy to say, is AI a tool? Is AI a technology? Is AI intelligent? Like, we want these simple yes or no answers to this very complicated situation.
All-encompassing simple answers, right?
Yeah. People want to, is it good? Is it bad? Yeah. Should I learn it? Should I not learn it? So this is not a time for that. This is a time like the Industrial Revolution, or I think I've compared it to the invention of fire. We are, luckily or unluckily, living through one of the pivotal shifts in our history. And so we have, the other thing that I was taken by in your kind of response was, I think it's so valuable to try to live in the present and look at your present as a historian, being a real-time historian. So not what is happening to me, not what is happening to my immediate social circle, but what is happening to people, and why are we acting this way, and how have things come to be this way, and what does that probably imply about the future. All prediction and futurism, which I'm a big futurist, comes from watching how people adapt and what not trends like 5-10 years, but like 10, 100, 1,000 years, or basic human nature things. Those are the things that'll tell us what's coming in the future.
But it's like, to some extent, you're looking at everything not as, we take a human, we put it in here, then we take an AI, we put it in here, and out there in the room together, something happens. It's like saying that the human is always on a trajectory. And what happens if we speed up his roller skates, or, give him a different, goggles or whatever? What will he do? And what will the trajectory do? Will he move to another one? Will he change course? What's going to happen, right? And that is, the continuum that I keep trying to look at when I'm looking at this. And I also think that, as you said, try to take something extremely complex and make it simple. You have to know so much. You have to understand the complexity really, really well to make it really, really simple. And what I then sometimes experience is that then I might make a very simple statement, something that's, I like to put things short, because you don't know this, but I also wrote a lot of poetry when I was young. So I like to find this one sentence that Rilke would have been proud of, basically. And so when I sometimes do that, people are not reading all the words with all the connotations they have, and that annoys me just as much. So it's all about, you have to go through the rounds, right? I want to add one more thing. I want to add that Nikolai Storm Lund on my podcast, we spoke about being a pragmatist in technology. He's an IT operations leader in Denmark at Velux. And I said to him in that podcast, and it just struck me while we were talking, that to be pragmatic on technology, you have to know so much about technology. So you can't really be pragmatic if you don't understand what happens all around it. Because if you don't know, you'll have to say no to it, right? Or else you're just acting in bad faith because you think, whatever, let's do this. I have no clue of the consequences. If you do that, you're just, you're an idiot. So there's no avoiding the complexity. There's no avoiding the deep understanding of things. Nothing is simple. It's not simple. It will never be simple.
Yeah. So your podcast tagline, if I'm getting this correct, is prioritize exploration over explanation. Yeah. Which was interesting for me to hear, because when I started Truth Collapse, it was quite dramatic. I launched it at a conference, and I really felt a lot of people going, "Okay, Noz, let's go. All right, let's fix this. Let's do it." And I'm like, "Yes, absolutely. Let's fix this. Let's do this." But it's not like I have a roadmap. I have lots of ideas, and I'm delighted and flattered that people seem to take an interest in hearing what they are. And I would love to organize and connect people and explore this, but nobody has it. Nobody has the answers. And this is a situation that requires extensive exploration before we will really have any conclusions. So
someone said about on my podcast, I think it was Ben Torben Nielsen who quoted someone he spoke to once at a conference, who said that in unclear futures, give me tentative answers, because if you give me clear answers, I'm already too late. Right, and if you can tell me this is what you should do, it means that I should have done it, because now you know what the consequences was of it, right? So you have to have tentative answers all the time. You have to find this edge. That's why I say exploration more than explanation, because if you explain things, if you regurgitate things, you put in 10,000 PowerPoints, and people do that. I invite them on a podcast, and they're like, okay, this is my 50th podcast I've done this year, as a guest, because I wrote this book. I'm just blah blah blah, whatever in my book, right? And I want them to get on this edge but what gets you up at night? What are you thinking about right now? Because if you give me what you already wrote in the book half a year ago, I'm already too late, right? I feel that way. I want to know, like I did with my professors in the university, I want to know, what are they right now focused on? What is happening to them? I don't just want to have the integral, the whole corpus of everything that they've already done. I want to have the differential. I want to know where we're moving, what's going to happen, where's the edge, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's why I do this.
Yeah,
That's why I say exploration more than explanation.
So what I hear is that if someone already has an explanation, it's that the field has been understood and the questions have an answer.
Yes.
Meaning we're not having the interesting discussion.
Yes.
The interesting discussion is where we don't have answers.
Yeah, that's why I also that's why the podcast end up being very complex, because I have to say then that all of the things they already know and already did, that's pre-understanding. We agree on that. And that means that, abbreviations and concepts, they're just there. And then we just move directly into, why is this interesting to you and me right now with all the experience we have, and it's not for everyone. I think it's quite niche, but I couldn't do it any other way. It's what gets me up in the morning. So I'm interviewing myself the same way I want to interview people, right? I'm doing the show I want to be on, right? And now I'm on yours, so I'm really happy for that.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm feeling very much like one of those sci-fi movies where you meet your doppelganger.
But you're
like
us, so
exactly. There's always one that's darker than the other one.
Great.
I'm happy to be the dark one. He's always the fun one.
Exactly.
So I'm just fascinated because you're making me think. It really bores me when I'm invited to a conference and they just say, just give the people practical, executable things they can do when they get home. And I'm like, yes, great, I can do that. We can do that. But you're on the Truth Collapse podcast, and when we're talking about artificial intelligence, sometimes people need to understand the bigger picture.
Listen,
so from your
what you just said,
okay.
I just had to comment on that because that annoys me so much. I'm actually starting to say it out loud. I've been doing that for the last only a week. So this whole weird twin thing you're talking about, and you and me, brother from it makes it gets actually a little bit creepy here, because this is something I've only started really to articulate, that whenever people ask me to come, can you come and give me practical, concrete AI I can use tomorrow? I'm starting to say no, or almost like, I don't want to do that, because one thing, I can only disappoint you, because I'll go out saying practical, you could blah, blah, blah. I can give you lots of things, but it will never be exactly practical enough for you tomorrow. And the problem is you go home and you say, nah, that was not what I was doing, so let's just stop it here. And the challenge there is that we started the discussion around technology instead of starting it around the pain points or the value propositions that you have. So if we started saying like, okay, I have this problem. Okay, let me fix that with this prompt, right? Or this setup that we're going to do. And then people are like, whoa, that worked. Okay, and now there's a reason to go into this practical prompt, blah, blah, blah. But if you start just saying, Lasse, come on and show me, how can you give me practical AI for a CFO? I don't know where to go. I don't want to do presentations where people are disappointed afterwards. I hate that. That's the worst thing in the world. Yeah. And they're almost always disappointed when they ask me for practical stuff. And I think it's because that conversation is a tech conversation. And tech means absolutely nothing. It's like asking me, about World War II and then asking me about a tank. I couldn't care less. And you shouldn't.
Absolutely. For me, the AI discussion is a discussion about humans. And so you've been looking at this, and we've both been in AI since before it was cool. So, and this podcast is about truth and information. So what do you see has changed? So how would you describe how we are changing how we relate to information, how we relate, which information is a way that we communicate truth. It's a way that it's one of the ways that we relate to our own truths. And so what do you see as changes?
I think, and this goes beyond AI, right? AI is accelerating it, right? But I'd rather say it right here, right now, that I'd love if we were discussing truth, information, data, but we're not. Unfortunately, we're all discussing attention. That's the only currency in the world right now. And there's multiple ways of stealing that or taking that and misusing that. It doesn't really matter if you're getting the right data, the right information, or any kind of truth. Truth is not even in the equation. It's all about, can we have your attention for 5 minutes longer if we make you a little bit more angry, or if we show you weird photos that do not exist. How can we surprise you enough so you'll stay, right? And that is actually my short answer to it. I think that's what has changed over the years. I remember being this, I grew up believing in Google. I did. I believed in Google. When I got my invite to my Gmail, it's like invite only in the beginning, if you remember that. And it felt like, it felt so special. I was like, whoa, I have 2 gigs of space right on my email. What's going on? Google was just giving it to me, and they were opening up the internet, and but now they're just cluttering my feed. And also when your Google search doesn't even work anymore, and I feel like such a product to them. My attention is all it's all about, right? And I feel like, to some extent, I actually do feel like an old friend has sort of, turned on me, and he wasn't playing honest from the beginning. Maybe we should have seen it, right? But don't you feel the same deep down on us?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the discovery and the excitement and the energy of the early internet, 2000 to 2020, was a beautiful thing in many ways. We didn't realize.
Right? I think when they won an election, some people would say, right?
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to go there.
Let's not do that.
No, the only reason is
but I'm just saying that no matter what you believe, there's some innocence was lost there, right? That's the point.
Yes. I would say that we started to see behind the curtain. I think I've said this on a previous podcast but it wasn't the Truth Collapse podcast. In the same way that, our movies and TV are becoming so meta, there's a guy named Johnny Carson in the US. He was one of these late night comedy hosts, and he would have guests and do interviews, and he would have his monologue where he would tell jokes, come out in a suit. And in North America, it was a very big deal. And I'm sure there's equivalents in all over the world. And it was always him. It was literally called The Johnny Carson Show. And now, 60 years later, there's equivalent shows. And it's fascinating because they talk about the writers. The person who is the face of the TV program speaks about the writers and the production crews, and they'll make a joke with the cameraman. So they've just taken away the mystique, the magic, the I am the star of the show, and there's 1,000 people working behind me, but it was all about the star before. And now we all understand that there's a process. We all understand the sourcing. I often go to the metaphor of like food. We used to kind of just eat the food, and now we're going, well, where did this chicken come from? And how was it fed? And how did they treat it? And what chemicals did they put it in? What were the regulations controlling those chemicals? Like, we see our world through the eyes of a society that has information at its disposal. We lived in a society that did not, and there we saw the world through the lens of people who could only see with their 5 senses. Now that we've internalized this capacity of knowing so much, we never want to see a product or a thing again the same way. And so the internet was the last thing that we could experience with that.
Yeah, but if we just had access to all the information in the world would be a better place, right? That was the point. That was the thing we believed in, to some extent, right?
That was the last naive.
Yes, that was the dream, right? But in the end, it was all about speed, production, and attention, and then that is not about quality and making us smarter. It didn't. But there's also another thing to what you're saying, because I remember back in 2005, I was living in Berlin with some friends, and we read some philosophy together. It sounds like I had a weird youth, right? I should have gone to rock concert, but I didn't. But we read Horkheimer and Adorno, the Enlightenment dialectics. I don't know what's called in English, the dialectics of enlightenment or something like that. And philosophy, right? German philosophy by 2 German exiled Jews who wrote it in the last year of the Second World War. So, a kind of pessimistic cultural critique. Okay, but they
my kind of people.
Yeah. But they actually wrote about this. They wrote that society and human culture moves in these two dialectics, these two poles all the time. That you move into something where you have so much information that you start to disseminate everything into smaller parts. So you see the liver or you see the kidney, you don't see the person anymore, because the person is just a construct of smaller parts. It's the same thing you're saying, right? Everything's made of smaller parts. Whereas there's a middle ground. When that happens, people feel estranged. And some people will react to that and say, no, I don't want to talk about the kidney. I want to talk about the person. So they oversimplify and you go the other direction. And they call that you talk about mana. He said they call it mana instead. Everything becomes myth in the end. So they move the other direction, say everything is myth now, and then we move into information and light.
Myth?
Yeah, myth.
Myth like mythology.
Myth, everything becomes mythical, right? You say all of nature is just the mother nature, right? So it's all that. And then the other one is the enlightened scientists who go, no, but it's this leaf, it's this the snail, this different kind of snail has this different kind, and you go into all these details, right?
It's all quantum physics.
But in the end, remember, you get that feeling when you're standing somewhere and it's beautiful. You're not looking at the details. You're just like, whoa, this is all amazing, right? That feeling against the other feeling where we disseminate everything and we discuss endless variations, right? And that is the problem. That is also the problem it's a problem in gender debates. I'm not going to go into that at all because I'm very feminist in general as a person and anti-power, but I don't believe there's a powerless room either. But I think the way we keep on making smaller and smaller categories is not helping. It's just only making sure that a lot of people will say, well, you know what, I don't believe in that cause because I really don't understand it. It has estranged me, and the estrangement means that then we go into attention bubbles and then we oversimplify again. And then we become evil. So it moves to those two.
So that's very interesting. So I've experienced this firsthand, what you're talking about. And it brings us back to the main topic of the show, which is that, I grew up with my various categorizations. So I am, I'm Latino. I'm an immigrant. I'm the child of immigrants. I have immigrated twice. I have 3 nationalities. I am multiracial. I have lived in European culture and I've lived in Europe, I lived in North America, and I'm LGBTQ, I'm part indigenous, and so when I went online, at the beginning I was just kind of me, and then over time, I think as we started to find our little communities, the goal was not to make a society anymore. I felt the goal was to divide and divide and divide and divide. And I saw this endless list of letters and tags and categories being added to my identity, and people then telling me stuff about me. Because you are an immigrant, child of immigrants, because you are Latino, because you are English-speaking male, and many people, a lot of people think I'm white. A lot of people think I'm white. I think in Denmark, you probably definitely see that I'm not. But when I'm in North America, a lot of people think I'm white. I think it's the way I sound, or I don't know, but they don't associate me with being Latino, and so then I am Latino, but I'm also taking the privilege of the enemy, and so this for me, we don't have to discuss the issues. If we look at this as historians again, I'm not telling you my sob story. What I'm saying is it's very interesting that we're in a society where we're connecting people, that ability to connect with smaller communities. And that ability to kind of create smaller discussions online of just those people, for me, has been dividing us and making me feel more separated, and that I have to choose. So now, instead of being in societies that are trying to get larger and more global, more integrated and multi-ethnic and multicultural, I feel like we're starting, in fact, some of the people who are saying that they want that are the ones driving it to become more divided and more separated, and that I feel pressured by my feed to pick sides. There's these extreme voices saying, are you part of this community or that community, etc. And it's very interesting for me as a North American, if I take my North American perspective, in North America we have a term BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. And I'm thinking, so I'm a BIPOC, And I'm going, why have I been assigned this concept of BIPOC? And because I live in Europe, so I see it, I understand it being a North American, but I also see it from a European perspective going, what is that? Black, indigenous, people of color. And then I realized it's the American need to have two options. And so BIPOC is the opposite of white.
Okay.
And so as a BIPOC person, I'm not a white person. And so it's like the euro. So we had all these European countries, and they had an American dollar. And all the European countries were like, oh no, we can't have this. This is not cool. So we're going to gather all together, and we're going to create this one identity called the euro, and this one currency called the euro, and then we will have something that can stand up against the dollar. And so, and for me, it's a very internet age thing where we've kind of networked all of the peoples, all of the everybody's, and we've sort of put them in opposition to who we felt was the one in power. And I see the internet just feeding that cycle of teams splitting and merging and then finding their opponents.
I think, I think the problem is that I think, and now I need to be a little careful as well how I phrase this, because
because yes, you're the white guy.
I'm the white guy. I'm definitely the white guy in the white shirt,
yeah.
right? Sitting here
you are the white guy.
In Scandinavia, being very white and with a white descent, ancestors and all that. But the problem is that there's if we start talking about smaller and smaller categories all the time to also create identity, because you also do that. You end up doing that. You take an identity, you give in an identity, and you take another one. Say, no, this is actually my heritage and my identity, and you make it smaller, more granular, make it specific, make something you're proud of. But the more we do that, the less people can actually talk about it and talk to you. You see it a lot in gender discussions as well right now. So some people will go like, oh, I understand you are you're a gay person. No, I'm transgender, bi, queer, something. People will make up. No matter how open or how tolerant you try to be towards this new category, the categories that you feel are being open, you can be reprimanded to say that you didn't understand the granularity of it. So then you get this anti-reaction. So I think that what we need to do is have this understanding of a pragmatic language as well, and a tolerance that requires a pragmatic language, because there's no inherent, there is no absolute truth out there. And maybe that is actually the point here in Truth Collapse, is saying that, was there ever a truth to collapse, Noz? Is my point, right? And I think we're forgetting a lot by hunting this truth, by being told by social media that we can find truth, because it can feed us things that sound like what we believe is the truth. It can generate, it actually generates a truth for me. My feed is coherent, It's like truth is out there. Everyone agrees. Everyone does not agree, right? And I think we're forgetting, I think what a liberal society is actually built on, and it's not built on just free, no tax and all that. It's built on tolerance. It's built on the Peace of Westphalia, where everyone was killing each other over stupid small differences in faith, right? Christians were killing. And then John Locke said, he wrote the Letter of Tolerance. You have to be tolerant to people. And tolerance that does not mean love. It just means I respect you're here. I know how to address you, and I can see you when I walk down the street, and it's okay. And
so I want to address this. I see what you're saying, but let's take another angle at it, which is, I feel like the internet takes legitimate anger, because all of these people, all of the people who I have joined me in being a BIPOC as I am, an LGBTQ BIPOC and the other letters besides, there is a legitimate anger. And there was an article in the New York Times recently by a gay man who was saying that our anger has become, I'm paraphrasing, but basically our anger has been whipped into a blind rage. And he pointed out that in 2023, in the last 5 years, one of the gay rights associations in the US declared a state of emergency. For the first time in their history, a state of emergency was declared. And there were, during the AIDS crisis, there was no state of emergency when you could lose your job, when you couldn't join the military, when you couldn't marry. There was never a state of emergency. And in 2023, we hit peak emergency. Is that true? Or is that we have had our truth so concentrated in certain doses that we feel the legitimate anger, legitimate persecution, the actual suffering the actual injustices are being amplified and shoved back on our faces so much that it takes real anger that should motivate discussion and change and creates a rage, which creates interpersonal aggression.
Yeah, I have this book by Amartya Sen upstairs, Identity is Violence, right? And
wow. That's a title.
Yeah, it is a title.
Talking about every word meaning
yeah,
something.
but it's something that's also from my history studies very much on my mind all the time. That whenever you identify strictly with something, it ends up being violent, right? And that also goes for the people who goes against. I'm not talking at all about queer theory or anything. I'm also saying all those people against it. They identify so aggressively with being not people who use those words, right? And then that becomes violent as well, right? And then you end up in a state of emergency. So if you don't have the tolerant discussion, the worst thing for me, the worst thing at all is if we can't talk to each other, if we don't have words to speak to each other, because then there is no melting pool, there's no politics, there's no society. It's if we can't tolerate each other, if we end up being just locked in our own echo chambers, that is the worst thing that could ever happen, because then there is nothing here. There's no stability. There's nothing saying this is what we want to do together, right? And I just see this. See this polarizing more and more, and maybe I see it actually as because people are hunting some sort of truth. There is a truth out there to be found. I don't think there is, and I don't think the more granular you get, I don't think you'll get to it, right? I think at some point you just have to say, Grandma, I'm happy you're recognizing and you're smiling at me while you're saying a wrong category to me, right? But I know you're trying to do it in your best opinion, and let's talk.
Your best.
And yeah, you're doing your best, right? Let's do our best to try to understand each other and speak to each other. Because the worst thing is, so many people are being coined as evil, whereas they're actually nice people when you meet them, right? I have parents who have had different immigrant racist views in the past, right? But then they met some immigrants, and then they were like, "Oh, you're so nice, and you give me these pancakes with meat in it," and they're like, "Oh, they're like durum," and I'm like, so you really like these people when you meet them, but you have these categories that where your sort of identity becoming evil. You're voting for something that's doing the opposite. Does that make sense?
So I come, and my mother as well. We're Latino Jews. And most people don't associate those things. In most people's minds, Latinos are Catholic. And so we go about the world and then suddenly find out, people will talk about Jews as if there are none in the room. And you will really see how people think when they don't know that they're talking about you. And so yes, I've absolutely had the experience of being friends with someone or working with someone, and then they'll say something about me, like it could be about LGBTQ people, it could be about Jews, it could be about Latinos, and they just don't realize who they're speaking to. And I say my mother because this has happened to her. She was a Jew who went to school in Switzerland and traveled a lot in Germany in the 50s. So only a couple decades earlier, it was a very interesting place to be a Jew in Germany. So I absolutely, there's this experience, and it's not legitimizing to accept someone else being wrong in your opinion. So I can say that this person is ethically and morally wrong, and I can believe that. And I can say that, as far as I'm concerned, is true. But I think that if we come back to the beginning of our discussion, simplifying the complex, I think the internet, in its reductive nature, in filter bubbles, in tweets, in posts, in 100-word messages and dialogues, it encourages us to think in the ultimate binary, which is good and evil.
Because the problem is that if I come and call you something you don't want to be called, but I do it in the best intentions to address you and talk to you, am I being evil? Yeah, today I am. Yes, I am. And I'm always saying, I will not call people what they do not want to be called. It doesn't make any sense, right? I always just, be so respectful. But at the same time, there's also I'm just trying to now flip it a little bit in my own head as well, saying like, but if you do it in the best intentions, to actually know about you, right? If I didn't have any other language and I want to know about how am I supposed to get to know about you if you hate whatever I'm starting starting with, right?
Yes. So I think you're raising a point.
Because there's no either. I'm trying to figure out the balancing here, because I can see that whatever I'm saying here I'm really going into some dangerous grounds, as a white person as well, right? It's not about either deconstructing everything into little bits, and it's not about creating the myth either, because then one myth will win and we'll have evil, right? But there is a middle ground somewhere where we meet each other and tolerate each other and talk to each other. And I think that's not what SoMe and the way we're doing the internet today is actually, I don't think it's encouraging it.
What is SoMe? Yeah, I think you mentioned on the previous podcast as well. What is I've heard that recently. SoMe.
Social media.
Oh, wow. Of course, I of all people have never heard that. SoMe, social media. That is one of the most tragic abbreviations I've ever heard.
That's true. That's actually true. I never thought about that.
As a poet, you should be crying when you use that expression. Social media. It's so me.
So not me.
God, it's so not me and so not anybody. That's painful. That's painful. What I've just heard. Sorry, I'm gonna take a second to recover from this term.
People call it SoMe, don't
social
they?
Media.
SoMe, don't they say that? I've heard it ton. I think it.
I have. Yeah, no, I saw it around recently, but I didn't know what it meant because I didn't have any context and I never looked it up. And so, yes, thank you. So I didn't realize that we had abbreviated social media to the worst thing we could have abbreviated it to.
No, yeah.
So I was going somewhere with that. Oh yes. So what I think you raised an interesting point, which is, I don't think I've said it in this podcast, that the internet collapses space and time. I think the way that it collapses space is obvious. It connects us at distances that we could never have connected before. And that does things to the world. When you collapse the world, when you collapse geography and you collapse culture so that we can all interact in one global conversation, that has had incredible effects. And most of them, I would say, a lot of them positive. I don't have a lot of problem with the collapse of space, because I think we should be able to see beyond our immediate communities. But the collapsing of time is much more dangerous. So what you're talking about is that, the internet creates a culture of you cannot make a first mistake. You are good or you are not good. And if you were ever in the wrong, or if you ever made a mistake, the mistakes of 20 years ago will show up side by side with your words of today. So young people grow up with this anxiety. Well, we all have it, but I think I can only imagine what it is for younger people to have grown up in an atmosphere. The mistakes that I make would be with me forever, and they will define me forever. Some of them just don't realize the magnitude, and they do and say things which then, of course,
but it's also an alternate reality.
But
right?
you're talking about this. Well, because it's not a reality, because we do change. We do live in time that goes forward. There's only
my wife once went, to
you cannot. You are not the person that you were.
My wife is a teacher. She went to her students and said that they were supposed to talk about social media, and I'm going to call it social media because you don't understand when I say SoMe. Anyway, social media. And then she said, "Oh, let's just look at this Facebook page." And then she took up a page from one of the girls in the class, and the girl was like, "No, don't show it." And she was like, "You're showing this to 1,000 people, including all your classmates and everyone else in school. Do you even realize this?"
So why can't I show you?
But she couldn't put it up on the screen because they were like, "No, now everyone can see it." Yes,
that's fascinating.
That's but you don't understand it, and that's. I think there's.
Okay.
I think let me just because I think there's something in this. Figuring out the truth is actually not. The truth is all of us, right? We are the society. We are the civilization. We are what we have built, right? And if we lose sight of what we are and how we interact and what we want from each other, the conversations that we're having right now, Noz, as well, we lose sight of everything that's built this, right? So I think that there's also this Slavoj Žižek, and now I've been paraphrasing now Horkheimer, I don't know, maybe wrongly, and now I do it with Žižek as well. Slavoj Žižek. He says in some of the quotes that
I thought it was Žižek.
I don't know. He's I don't know. But the point is, our weird postmodern society, we want to have the thing without the thing. We watch porn to have sex without sex. We drink diet decaf Coke to have Coke without Coke, right? We want things without having the thing. It's the weirdest thing. It's consumerism gone crazy. You know, we don't even buy things we have. We buy things that symbolizes to have a thing that's not the thing that we want to have. And in the same way, social media.
You just described NFTs.
Yeah, exactly. NFTs. But that is the metaverse, right? That is also the internet right now, right?
Yeah.
It is all about I can see Noz in his posts, but this is not Noz, right? I can also see what he aligns with, what kind of groups and words and niches he aligns with, but that's not Noz. You know, no one falls. One falls. I like to say, losslessly, right, into any category, right? And still we use it. We cling to them as our identity, and we just have to remember this violence part of that.
So there's unfortunately I do have to wrap this up because I could talk to you for a lot longer. I think I want to get this in because I don't think there's any podcast more appropriate for me to drop this particular comment because we're talking about the effect of the internet on culture and how we perceive ourselves in society. And I went from Toronto in North America, which is, you know, one of the most multicultural city in the world, if I don't remember it. I think 75% of marriages are mixed. Like the vast majority of people are mixed, or they're immigrants or children of immigrants. Like Toronto is the achievement of multiculturalism and one of the most peaceful and integrated examples of it. And then I came to Spain, where I was like, I think I will die there, and I will clearly never truly be Spanish. I won't feel it, and they won't feel it towards me that I am Spanish. And so I've seen this from both sides, and living in Europe and living in Toronto, I saw two different perspectives on the same question: what is diversity? And because I went to places like London and Paris and Istanbul and Rome and Madrid, and I go into a cafe, you know, and there's a barista, and I look at the art on the walls and the music that's playing on the radio and the kind of people that are in that cafe, and I swear to God, I've been sitting in a cafe in Istanbul that could be in Southern California or in London or God knows where else. It looks exactly the same. The people dress the same, they look the same, they sound the same. Well, they're speaking a different language. And so there's what we call diversity in North America is that intense mixing. And I think that's great. But it's a diversity at different resolution. Because if you zoom out, they all look the same. There's no diversity. It's just this gray of all the people being everywhere. And I'm not saying there's no right or wrong here. I'm just pointing out that it's two different ways of looking at truth and what is happening. In Europe, when I came to Europe, I saw a different kind of diversity at a different scale. I saw all these people who were speaking the same language and had the same background and they knew the same songs and did the same dances. But then you go to another country and it changes, and it changes dramatically. Like Spain and Norway feel and look very different.
They do,
except for in these little urban. You know, except for until you go into the cafe, in the major urban centers. So it's just a different lens through which to see diversity. And I was raised on the North American version of diversity, which is that European diversity is wrong. You shouldn't have national cultures. You shouldn't have old traditions. That is, you know, they are the colonists who have ruined everybody else's cultures. Those cultures are like, that's the bad diversity. We want the good diversity where every single person, like if you go through a room, every other person should be something different than the person next to them. I am not saying either of these is better or worse, but I think that we need to kind of take a step back and reflect on, we're so quick to state what kind of world we want to create, and I think that these technologies will only accelerate all of these processes of
it'll give you even more life. You know, AI will give you
other.
Images of more life that you don't have and don't see and all that, and that consumer AI,
it'll allow you to pretend
even more. And I just think that one of the worst things for me, because I'm typically very left oriented or very, you know, libertarian in that way, and I want to think, I have an open mind to things, but one of the worst facts of Europe is that it became peaceful after it became homogeneous nation states. And that happened after the Second World War. All of the nationalities, they were moved around according to what language they spoke. Everything was a chaos on the continent. So they moved people into the countries where they thought, you belong here. get a house, build something. You live here now, buy it. And that meant that, and the weird thing is that meant that these nation states, they said, okay, we share common beliefs now. Now we can enter a cooperation with the other ones, being who we are. So what am I trying to say with that? I'm not trying to say we should have these homogeneous national states, because that's not what I believe at all. But I'm just saying that. That getting at peace with some kind of a mass identity means that sometimes you can be tolerant and open to other things, and that's the middle ground. Not saying that now my category has to defeat and rule and kill everyone else, or that the smaller categories have to be hateful to granularity, but find that middle ground where we say, okay, that's the tolerance middle ground, and that's also the middle ground where we meet each other. But it used to be that every Dane could celebrate the same football matches, right? But suddenly also the flag has become labeled with evil nationalism, right? Where are these things that makes us a political society? And I'm trying to say this without being conservative as well. I'm just saying that these are some of the things that I keep thinking about, figuring out what is actually happening here, because things are changing, and there's not these people are just wrong. No person. And it's also on enterprises.
I'll give you a simple phrase that shows the kind of the madness, because I've lived it, having moved around and being from so many cultures. And the message that is being given to me, being a minority, being an immigrant, is you can be happy about where you're from as long as you're not there. That's actually the message. If you are where you're from, you can't be celebrated and be happy about it. You have to be somewhere else, and you go, hey, I am celebrating my culture, because it's not the culture of wherever this is. And it's that kind of illogical, irrational message that when you talk in little sound bites, people don't realize that they're actually communicating. So we have to wrap this up. I'm loving this, but we've got to wrap it up.
But just I'm just saying that it's just more complex, right? It's just there's nothing saying this or that is the right thing. It's all about figuring out how do we meet each other. I think that's the most important thing, right? And then someone said once in a poetry.
I have a last question, which I think you're going to love.
A poet said that a home that doesn't exist can never be left as well. So I want to say that to you as an immigrant as well. And it's also easy for me to say, let's just be tolerant. But I've never been to bars where they try to beat me up. Okay, not really. Yes, I had long hair, but that was something I chose.
It's not a fun experience.
For me, it's much more simple for me to say, oh, let's just be tolerant. I know that as well, right?
Yeah. No, it's not fun.
Just one. Yeah. Okay, John Rawls. That's what I want to say. He said that you have to create society behind a veil of uncertainty, so you don't know tomorrow what position you will be in. And that is what, more than anything, I believe in, right? That we should say, would I wake up tomorrow and be this person here in this role, or this with this gender, or this cultural heritage, and would I be okay? Would I feel that I had opportunities, right? Or would I feel repressed? That is how I want to think about making society.
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful way to end it. Okay, let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, Lasse.
You had a question, didn't you?
Obviously, we have to talk. I did, but we've run out of time, and I will ask you next time you're on the show, or maybe we'll discuss next time I'm on your show.
Let's do that, Noz. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Talk soon. Thanks, everybody.